Hello everyone, welcome back to the Christ MotoGP podcast, and it is Grand Prix win number 88 for Marc Marquez, and it was an incredible victory for him at Phillip Island. He took victory in, how could you say, it was an interesting start of the race for him, but we'll get into that shortly. Jorge Martin has extended his championship lead by 10 points after a really solid weekend. It was a struggle for his championship rival, Pecco Bagnaia. And we've got also talk about wildlife affecting races, big incidents as well with aerodynamics getting involved, and history for Ducati as they become the first team to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 finish with manufacturer since 1997, so 27 years ago. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Joining me as ever is Pete McLaren and Lewis Duncan. And Lewis, we'll start straight away with Marc Marquez's performance. It was dramatic to say at the very start, but it was his own doing, really. It was quite unlucky, but it was one of his best rides ever, I think.
Yeah, I think it was vintage Marquez. It was kind of maybe the first time we've seen the old Marquez kind of, back in action. Yeah, okay, we had that dominant win at Aragon, but it was very much kind of circumstantial, whereas Phillip Island was, the start with the tear off, which was, well, obviously it kind of relates to the wildlife thing with you got a big mosquito splattered his visor, and he had no time to get rid of it, and unfortunately the wind blew the tear off under his rear tire, which we laugh at it, but it could have been quite a serious accident. Bagnaia came quite close to hitting him. He was 13th at turn 1, and then somehow ended up in P6 after a couple of corners. But I think what was the most kind of incredible thing about it really was, he's on this GP23, and we know that people like to say, well, there's not much difference. As Jordan, you pointed out in a great graphic a couple of weeks ago, that the points difference between Marquez and the other GP23s suggests that there is quite a big difference. And obviously now we know that the engine has had this sort of flywheel change since Indonesia. So in theory, it's even slower than the GP24s, and yet somehow Marquez rode that as if he was on a factory bike. And now everyone's kind of looking towards next year and thinking, just what can he actually do on a GP25? Because I think this is the first weekend we've really seen that sort of that door open. What this is what he can do on a GP23 that is pegged back quite considerably and has quite a lot of problems. Just naturally anyway. We know it really pushes the front of that bike. The engine braking characteristics of the bike are really different to the GP24. Just what can he do next year? That should be kind of a bit concerning for everyone, and not least Pecco Bagnaia.
Yeah, Pete, what was your take on his performance? It was his race pace. It was just truly astonishing. He did his fastest lap of the race was a 10.5 quicker than his qualifying time. Like, that's just ridiculous, for just showing you how good he was with that bike and how he just became almost one. And like Lewis said, it became like the old Marquez. We've seen it again for maybe the first time in 5 years, really.
Yeah, I think you guys have hit the nail on the head there. It was a Marquez win, wasn't it? And that is maybe the only thing, isn't it, to observe, is that they've all sort of been Marquez wins this year, haven't they? Dodgy tarmac, a bit of rain in Misano, and now a real rider's track. And as you guys have said, he makes this massive difference. I mean, that was Marquez making the difference, wasn't it? Was it?
Yeah.
It wasn't the GP23 that won on Sunday. It was Marc. And I mean, that's a big tick for him in that box that he wanted ticked at the start of this year of, do I still have it? Wasn't it? He can now say he has it as a rider, but I think. Looking, Lewis raises a good point there about next year. Looking to the title fight for next year. In a way, I think he'll actually want to. The one piece of the puzzle that's maybe left is that he'll want to win on a track where the bike makes the difference a bit more, maybe. And that might be, as you guys have said, put him on the factory bike and he's able to do it week in, week out. But at the moment, I just think that it's Marc winning these races. What would he have done on a KTM at Aragon, at Misano? Phillip Island, I think, as you guys have said, I think, the other bikes were too far away. The top 6 Ducatis, you needed to be on a Ducati. And we've seen in the past that Marc can't win if the bike isn't there, like the Honda. But I think, what we're seeing is that Marc is incredible in situations and tracks where he has been incredible in the past. And that should definitely worry people for next year. But I think also over a season, he's going to want to be up there also at tracks, and we've got a couple of them coming up where traditionally he's not been great. We've heard about him talk about high grip, haven't we? And how he maybe loses. We saw it at the Misano rounds. He drops away a bit there. I think you'll want to see, just as the very final piece of the puzzle going into next year and what we all expect to be a title challenge, you want to see himself, be a lot closer to the top guys in difficult situations maybe. But other than that, I mean, yeah, flawless ride and vintage Marquez, as you guys have said.
Yeah, it was just vintage, and that's the best way to describe it. I said yesterday morning in our work chat, Dave, I think that's maybe his best MotoGP win ever. Not his greatest Grand Prix win, because I think there's some in the lower classes where I think it really stamped it. And I think of that Valencia 2012 one in the wet, where he just was at the back and he just cut through everyone and made everyone look like they were like in a video game sort of thing, which was incredible. But I think it's maybe his best MotoGP win, purely for the fact that the start, we said the tear off. I'll put a video for our watchers now. You see it, like it just. He keeps looking, and it just goes underneath the rear tire. And there actually is an unwritten rule that it's like a gentleman's agreement with the riders. Bagnaia touched on it, and Marquez yesterday, that they don't take tear offs on the grid purely because what happened in 2020 with Quartararo and Miller at Misano, where the tear off gets sucked up into the front of the bike and it blocked off the engine, so it just cut out. So it did all the air getting to it. I think for what happened at turn 1, where he was 13th, then to be 6th into turn 2 somehow, which Alex Marquez jokingly said that, him and Miller got tangled and it just created a big gap for him and he just shot through, so he's taken like a part assist for it. But the pace to catch Bagnaia was incredible already, and he said after, Lewis, that he looked and he thought, well, Martin's not getting away, let's see if we can do it. And we just seen in those final laps, he caught right up to the back of him, and yeah, the move to get the race done, essentially the worst win overtake, Martin thought it was quite aggressive, but it was just a good old block pass, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think the one thing that kind of nobody's sort of spoken about yet about that move is that you watch the onboard and you kind of see that when Mark goes to, he kind of does get a little bit out of shape there. It's almost as if the move is a bit more aggressive than maybe he'd planned for it, because he's kind of gotten a bit out of shape, but at that point you've realised, well, it's too late, I need to try and do something. I think what was interesting about that is we've seen a lot this year that obviously Marquez, with the front end of that bike, has maybe gone over the limit, when he's pushing. We saw great control there. He didn't really make many mistakes. He was able to fight with Martin kind of on level terms. And it was, he said in the press conference, he felt great behind Martin. He felt natural. He felt smooth. It's probably the first time all season he's felt that. And I think, that's another kind of element to this win was just, there was no weather involved. We know Pecco struggled a little bit, but there was not really like kind of any odd circumstances. Marquez said coming into the Grand Prix, if it was like what he described as a rally race, and that, essentially everyone starts to become staggered. He expected Martin to be faster than him and to walk away, and in those early laps it kind of looked like that was going to be the case. And I think we have to give credit to Mark as well, that, like people like to say, he's not going to care about the title fight, he doesn't care, he just wants race wins. Mark is now a Ducati ambassador. He's a factory rider next year. He the way you listen to him, the way he talks about Ducati, he understands the game. He's not going to go and start nerfing people off. He's not going to do things like that. So, that gives his overtake for the race win as well a bit more credence as well, because it was aggressive, but it was clean, and and really, really well calculated, because he knows had it gone wrong, then that's a storm that, Phillip Island, Marquez crashes into a title challenger, that he's smart enough to know the optics of that. So, he deserves a lot of credit for that overtake, and it was great. And, we talk about hard, fair racing. We want hard overtakes. That was it. Martin wasn't hit off track. There was no contact. That's it. You can have those types of racing. That's what we talk about when we want hard, fast, clean racing. Not demolition derby. I'll use him as my breaking point, and then whatever happens to him doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, because it showed that he was still able to think yesterday, Pete Marquez, because he knows the situation with the championship. He knows he's not involved, but he if I think it goes back to even Thursday, the press conference with Martin, where he said he wanted to go back to 2014, 2015 to see his true level. He's referring to the four really back then being Rossi, Pedrosa, Marquez, and Lorenzo. Well, Marquez kind of brought him back that way, showing him this is how you race, and he was surprised. He said, "Yeah, wow, he's really aggressive," and I think it's the first time that the newer generation of riders have seen Marquez like this, really, because he obviously got injured and he hasn't really been the same since. Yes, of course, he's won races since, but this was almost a reminder to them, being like, this is one of the aliens still, and like, look at what he can do. Look at the difference, and it's a testament to his last two laps, Mark. He was 4 times quicker than Martin both laps, and he done like 128 flats. Like, it was just incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the first time he passed Martin, at the hairpin on the way out, wasn't it? When Martin sort of went a bit wide. That was kind of the nice pass, wasn't it? And I think that was Mark going, well, look, I'm ahead now. I'm fast. Let's see how you play this. Martin then chose to fight back, which is great. What we want to see. And I think it was then that Mark maybe said, okay, then I'm going to take it up a level. And we saw the harder pass that sort of settled it, didn't we, into the hairpin. That was how I sort of saw it. It was, Mark gave him the chance to just, look, I'm going to take the lead in a nice way here, and I'm not going to squeeze you. But if we get down to it, as we all know, we've all said this on the podcast, it's the best card that Bastianini and Marquez, Acosta can play is that they're not in the championship fight. If it comes down to it, it's not going to change Mark's season if he falls off. As Lewis has quite rightly said, there'd be a whole media storm after it if he took down a championship rival. But you know what I mean? Clearly, if they were to clash, the big loser would have been Martin. And Mark knows that, and Martin knows that as well. And that's why, you saw that when it got a bit close, they moved out of each other's way. Or Martin went, very wide, didn't he, and kept clear. And so I think, it was a nice battle to see. It's not exactly even circumstances because of the situation with the title, but it was still great. And good on them, all of them. They put on a good, clean fight. And as you say, that's what we want to see, especially after a few, let's face it, pretty dull races that we've had prior to Phillip Island. So we also got to see Pecco and Martin. They fought for what? A lap, okay? Not we prefer it to be for longer, but at least, and I think one of them even mentioned it, didn't they? After the race, it was even on their radar that finally we had a bit of a race together and passed a little bit there at the middle of the race, wasn't it? Before Pecco sort of faded. So we did get to see some action among the top guys, and it is what we want to see. We want to see the young guys, as you say, Jordan, taking on Mark. This guy who's that link to the alien era, and going up against him, and as we're seeing, he's still on at the top of his game in when the situation plays to his sort of advantages with the bike he's on at the moment. So great stuff. Let's hope we see more of it in the next 3 rounds.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting prospect because you could see the confidence yesterday, Lewis, from Marquez. He became one with the bike, and that's to credit to Jorge Martin as well. We'll say he has extended his championship lead, and he was clearly way ahead of Bagnaia yesterday on the same bike, that GP24. He's got to take a lot of confidence from that too, surely.
I think that the thing for me, the moment for me of that weekend, it really kind of the Martin really stretched his legs a little bit as being the kind of the favourite for this championship. Now was Friday. We had that cancelled practice session. We only had one practice session, and then it was meant to be an hour and 20 minutes. It was shortened again to an hour. Martin crashed early on. There was a threat of rain, and there was a red flag. His second bike was set up for wet. There was a lot of delays. There was a lot of an opportunity there for Martin to get flustered, to make another mistake, to end up in Q1, and he didn't. And I think that set the tone for the rest of the weekend because qualifying was brilliant. He was almost 6/10 clear of everyone. He was brilliant in the sprint race. People, 1.5 seconds was the finishing margin, but he was over 3 seconds away before the point he backed off, and that was only a couple of laps from the end. Martin was a couple of laps away in the Grand Prix from a really perfect weekend, and he deserves an immense amount of credit for that. And I think it's really the first time this year we've seen truly the kind of the more mature nature of this version of Jorge Martin compared to last year. He's learned from the mistakes of the races later last year that kind of cost him the championship. He's not getting flustered. He's consistent still. You look at Pecco and his consistency is up and down, up and down. Martin is very stable. He's always first, second, around there. And as Pete says, he deserves a lot of credit for fighting back with Marquez. He didn't need to do that, and I think Martin is of the opinion that if you're faster and he feels good on the bike, that you do have to have a little bit of a fight, because those 5 extra points could be really, really important. As it is, he's got a 20-point lead again going to Thailand, which was a Grand Prix weekend he was great at last year. People are talking about, well, get to Thailand, bit better for Pecco. Pecco was resoundingly beaten by Martin last year, so I think this was a really, really big weekend for Martin, and it hasn't shaken my belief that he's the favourite for the championship now. I actually think if we see another weekend like that in Thailand, then we're probably going to look at the championship being won at Sepang, because I just think now Martin is on such a roll, and just everything about his game is just so much better. He's tidied everything up that he needs to tidy up. He's not erratic, he's not mistake prone, he's not, he's just, and even when the bike isn't quite there for him, he still seems to ride around those problems. He wasn't quite comfortable on Friday, he wasn't quite comfortable in the Grand Prix. He said, he was a little bit struggling with rear traction. He was still fighting for the victory, and he was still miles away from Pecco.
Yeah.
We're just seeing, if it wasn't for Marquez, we'd be spending this entire hour of the podcast heaping praise on Marty, because he was also brilliant.
Yeah, he was awesome. And I will say, Pete, the pole position lap that he done, I'd rank it right up there with the Marquez lap at Aragon in quali. I think that's how good it was. He was so different to everyone else. He just picked the harder front tire when everyone kind of went to mediums, and he just went out of the box straight away and blitzed everybody. It was a real, a strong weekend for him. And we kind of touched on it before, Pete, that setup change-wise, he keeps everything the same. Every track he goes to, he doesn't really touch his bike. But Bagnaia, on the other hand, is very sensitive to changes. We always see Pecco maybe more in the past, where Friday would be the sort of building day where he'd maybe get the issues out the way and he'd be slower. But Martin just seems to ride around issues, like Lewis says. He just adapts to the track conditions, he adapts to surroundings. It's a real stark difference between the two, isn't it, at this point of the season?
It is, absolutely, yeah. If you see Martin making big changes to the bike, he's in trouble, don't you? He doesn't want that. He wants the stability. He wants to know what he's got under him, and he just likes a little tweak here and there, and that's it. Whereas Pecco is much more willing to, I think, try different things to try and get that edge, isn't he? And sometimes it works for him, and I think we see him untouchable on some weekends. But on other weekends, and Lewis has explained with the shortened format this weekend, it can work against you because you don't have the practice time, and he just never really caught up, did he, by the point of the race. And as you say, qualifying for Martin, really brave move to go out on the hard front tyre on a damp track like that, when everybody else went out on either a medium or a soft for their first run, just to test the conditions. And it just showed the confidence he's got. And I think Lewis is absolutely right as far as the championship. I think Bury Rome is crucial in terms of the tipping point of, are we going to get a Valencia title decider or not, or certainly a Sunday one, because as Lewis has said, Bury Rome was perfect for Martin last year. So you've got to imagine he's got a 20-point lead now. On paper, he should increase that again this weekend. You never quite know what will happen. So he could go into Malaysia with a lead in the high 20s, maybe the early 30s of points. Now, Sepang is maybe a bit more to Pecco on paper. Valencia maybe a bit more equal. But either way, that's a big lead, isn't it? And suddenly he's going into the Sunday at Sepang with a chance of the title, which is something that none of us have really up until now. We've all been focused on, because this is also what the teams and riders are telling us. It's going to Valencia. It's going to Valencia. Well, maybe it isn't, as Lewis has said. There's that sort of the quote about going bankrupt, isn't there? How do you go bankrupt? It goes gradually and then suddenly. And you could always say, how do you win a MotoGP title? You win it gradually and then suddenly. And we might be at that point where Martin's been gradually building this lead, and suddenly now he could find himself in a title-winning position as early as the penultimate round. So, a big weekend. And really, as Lewis has said, it's stacked in Martin's favour going into Bury Rome. Last year, absolutely perfect for him.
Yeah, Lewis?
Yeah, and I think that the other thing as well is that, Bagnaia's got this 7 DNFs hanging over his head. Martin's now put him in a position where one more mistake is probably fatal for his chances, because we've seen when there's been a swing of points back towards Pecco, he's still not been able to then take the lead in the championship. Martin's consistency is ensured that if there is a mistake, then he's got a bit of margin there to protect himself. I think if we go into one more crash in a race, and especially a Grand Prix for Pecco, then you are looking at a situation where it is over, because I don't think we've really ever seen Pecco's back against the wall over the past 2 years in his championship fight. He came from 91 points back in 2022, but he was going up against an inferior Yamaha package. By rights, by Quartararo probably shouldn't even have been in the championship hunt by the end of the season, just given the pace of the bike. Last year, he was going up against a Jorge Martin who didn't really get going in the first half of the season, and then was a rookie in terms of fighting for a MotoGP championship. So he made mistakes. We don't really seen a kind of a Pecco where he's the slower of the championship contenders, and he's not the favourite. And I think Phillip Island kind of showed, maybe that's where the weakness is, because he, as Pete says, he was quite good on Friday, but he made a setup change that went in completely the wrong direction, and they made a bit of a step back towards the right way for Sunday, but it never really, he just went too far away from it. And as you pointed out before, Jordan, Pecco just seems really a bit too sensitive. He needs the bike to be right in the sweet spot, or else he can't do anything with it. Whereas, as we've spoken about, Martin, it just needs to have some grip and some braking stability, and they can go and make the most of it. So I think Martin has now put Pecco in a position where one more mistake is that's it for his title hopes.
Yeah, for me, it's a difficult one this season, because I always see people. Obviously, I do socials for us, and I always see people saying that Bagnaia is clearly the better rider because he's won more Grand Prix, won 5 more. But over the whole season, I've just seen Martin pick his moments, and his moments are just getting the points when he needs to. And Pete Bagnaia went back to the Alex Marquez thing yesterday. We're saying that's the reason maybe there's a deficit. It's weighing more on the championship, that incident. But he didn't factor in the mistake that he made at Misano. The clashes with Marquez at Portimao. These things have added up, and maybe one too many mistakes has cost him. But he's not considering his own mistake that he made in Misano, I think, which we did mention then. I think he should have settled for just the 3rd place because he got away with it at the start of that race. He should have known when to settle. This is maybe a test of his mental strength at where he's at with this title fight. Is he viewing it from, okay, I was caught in this incident, that's what's stopping me, or is it the mistakes that I've made that have cost me that? You get what I mean? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, interesting in itself that he's looking back at those sort of instances at this stage in the championship, isn't it? Could you imagine Martin doing that now? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe, the focus should be on, look, there's everything to play for still. It's 20 points. There's 3 rounds. Let's go for it. What's happened has happened. There's no point. That the fact that that's even still on his mind, I think is slightly surprising. I mean, obviously he's not going to be pleased about it, but he can't do anything about it now. It's whoever was at fault. It's done.
Yeah.
There's 3 rounds left, and this is the moment, isn't it? And another thing that's going to come into it, and it comes back to what we've been saying with Marquez, but is how do the title guys, the 2 title favourites, how do they use Marquez and Bastianini, maybe Acosta, although of course the injury now, but if they're up there in the fight, how should they maybe, because we saw Pecco hold up Marc quite a lot in the sprint, I thought, for a few laps.
Yeah.
Now maybe with hindsight, it would have been better to actually, okay, let's see if Marquez can go and win this and take points off Martin. And there'll probably be situations, Sepang is probably going to be a track where there's going to be quite a lot of Ducatis up there at the front. I mean, Acosta was great in pre-season testing. Mm-hmm. So the question mark about the injury, but maybe Brad Binder as well on the KTM. That there could be other bikes up there. And so they're going to have to maybe think about putting other bikes between them, or how to maybe use these other riders. And so they're definitely not just in this fight on their own. As the incident with Alex Marquez showed, anything can happen with other riders as well. But yeah, I think that's maybe another dimension that could come into it. Is guys like Marquez, Bastianini, the other guys that can fight at the front and get between them.
Yeah, but it's certainly interesting because how they're gonna. It's a good point, actually, Pete. I didn't think about that. The sprint, he should maybe just release the dog almost in Marquez and go get Martin for me. But it worked yesterday. He should really be thanking Marquez Bagnaia because he took points off Martin. He's kept him in it almost. Like he's kept the gap shorter, and yeah, that's a good point because I think that there's going to be so many twists and turns, especially in the next 2 rounds. I think Sepang we've seen last year with Andrea Bastianini, how strong he is around there, and you say that there comes an opportunity where it's okay, Pecco, you need to just let Andrea go for the benefit of your championship. Is it hard for him to accept that? Because he of course he's going for 3 championships in a row with MotoGP. He's the man. It must be a real blow to him, Lewis, to think that maybe I can't win it all on my own. I might need help from others.
Yeah, but I think the mark of a great sportsman is you accept help from your teammates, from your stablemates, and that's a great football team isn't good because of one player. It's all a combination, and it's a good point you make, because I think we said the same thing in Misano, when we should have let Bastianini go earlier to try and fight Martin. Of course, Bastianini won that Grand Prix anyway, but it's kind of like you need to use. You need to. It's a strategy. A race is also a strategic thing, and you need to kind of use that in your head. And we know Bagnaia has spoken before about he doesn't like team orders. He doesn't want to win championships like that. But I think he needs to put his pride aside for 1 second and go, look, I am now behind in the championship. Something needs to happen. The Alex Marquez mention is an interesting one, because what will really help Pecco in these final couple of races is if Marc carries on this Phillip Island form in the next few rounds. We know Valencia will be a good track for Marc, anti-clockwise. In theory, we've seen him go quite good in Thailand before in the Honda, and he doesn't want to start kind of making too much of a point on the Alex Marquez thing, because Marc will be less inclined to help him. Marc's got the factory contract. He's got Claudio Domenicali's support. We see Gigi is like a proud father now when it comes to Marc. The narrative before, when Marc signed last year, that Ducati really didn't want him there, has so eroded, because they have seen, well, just look what can happen. Marc can do what he wants, essentially. If Pecco keeps slagging off Alex Marquez and say, it's because of this, Marc will be less inclined to, if he's in front, in Valencia, for example, and if he moved over, Pecco wins the championship, Marc would be less inclined to do that, because he'll go, well, if I go and win the race, that's also good for, Pecco. I think, Ducati are in a bind because they can't really tell Bastianini what to do because he's leaving. They can't obviously put any pressure on Pramac because they're leaving.
Yeah.
There's the VR46 riders aren't going to really help. They might want to help Martin, but they're not quick enough to be there. Help Bagnaia, sorry, but they're not quick enough to be there to challenge Martin. So, I think Pecco just needs to kind of accept that if he's slower than one of his stablemates and they can go and chase down the other rider, then let it happen. And if they don't overtake them, then they don't overtake them, but you're not really going to gain anything by keeping them behind. You're only going to lead yourself actually to maybe causing an incident, because if you frustrate someone, that's when mistakes happen. Yeah. Especially now when it's so hard to overtake in MotoGP.
Exactly. You just don't know what could happen. And we'll park the Ducati talk, because you mentioned overtaking and how difficult it is. We've seen a really nasty incident in the sprint with Marco Bezzecchi and Maverick Vinales going into turn 1, 149 miles per hour. Bezzecchi was on the outside, he braked to move into the inside, but then gets sucked in, I believe, by the aero wake of the bike in front, which is Maverick Aprilia. Just a real violent crash, wasn't it? And thankfully both of them are okay, but the aftermath of it, of course both riders see it differently. Bezzecchi got along that penalty, but it was a real scary incident, and it kind of highlighted the aerodynamic thing as well. That was a real big talking point on socials. What happens when you have so much aero, it creates this vortex almost where they all just get sucked into it, and then it just creates a big incident. But thankfully both are okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's the main thing. Yeah, I mean, the aero thing getting sucked in, I mean, it was obviously a factor, but you've also got to say how many other riders didn't get sucked into the braking zone and have an incident. I mean, it's just part of the modern MotoGP, the skill set, isn't it? That you've got to be aware that these things can happen, and just maybe the gust of wind, that's something that you can't control, obviously, and whether that was an issue as well, that the turbulent air was combined with a gust of wind that was pushing him. He felt behind Maverick to the outside of the track. He was trying to go to the inside to avoid him, and everything sort of happened a bit quickly. But I mean, we got a refreshingly detailed explanation from the stewards, didn't we? I mean, of what they felt happened and the action that they took as far as speaking to the riders, looking at the data, the breaking points of each riders and everything else. So we understand why they came to their conclusion, which was that Bezzecchi was obviously mainly to blame, being the rider behind and apparently braking a bit later than normal. and things like that. Whether that was also due to the turbulent air, there was some talk that he rolled the throttle back on because of the turbulent air, then had to shut it again. He said also that Maverick maybe didn't brake the same, but the bottom line is that the rider behind, the presumption is always going to start with that it's their fault, isn't it, in that kind of situation? And it's up for them to come up with some compelling evidence that it wasn't their fault, and he wasn't able to do that, and he got really what was the lowest penalty, I suppose, in that scenario, wasn't it? Even the steward said it should probably, under normal conditions, have been a double long lap. They took into account the turbulent factor of the wind that maybe was at play there, so they gave him a single long lap. So there we are. I mean, and we should also mention though that some riders behind ended up getting caught up in the debris, of course.
Yes.
And there's another discussion about perhaps it should have been red flagged, that really, with the amount of debris on track, that's such a fast part of the track as well. Salvadori obviously couldn't finish the race on Sunday because of the whack he took to his elbow. I think it hit the titanium plate on his elbows and all that kind of stuff. At that kind of speeds, I mean, we're going to come on to the wildlife, aren't we? But really, anything that you hit at those sort of speeds is going to hurt.
Yeah, Lewis, we've seen it before at Phillip Island in the Turn 1. Think back 2018 with Zarco and Marquez. That was the one that came to mind straight away. But to me, I thought that it was mostly on Bezzecchi. I can't understand this Vinales blame. I think it's really harsh on Maverick, so it is.
Well, Maverick was miles ahead when they got to the braking zone. It wasn't as if Maverick had just overtaken him. Like, he'd blasted past before they got to the braking zone. He was very clearly the rider in front, and yeah, as Pete says, nobody else kind of had those issues. Yes, we know aero turbulence is a problem, and I'll get back to that in a sec. But it's always been a problem at that corner, for years and years and years, because it's so fast. The approach is so. You're coming off of the final corner where you're building up a lot of speed. You're and you're going downhill as well, and there's the wind, and it's a fast corner. It's a tricky place. It's very, very dangerous at the best of times. So yeah, Bezzecchi just misjudged it. Obviously he's the rider who got the penalty, so he's going to feel like he didn't deserve it. That's just human nature. But I think him and VR46 are very, need to step down a little bit and just accept that Bez made the mistake, and that was it. And luckily both riders were all right. Bit of a whack, but Maverick finished the race. Bez couldn't because he crashed, unfortunately. But what for me was interesting about the stewards' note was that it's kind of the first time I think we've ever, in this sort of modern era of aero and ride height devices, that they have kind of acknowledged the impact that the aerodynamics has had on an incident. And I think the complicity of the aero in this accident sort of does, if any of the teams have any sort of smart lawyers, any of the non-Ducati manufacturers, let's say, have any smart lawyers on them, they could argue that then is an admittance that aerodynamics are making MotoGP more dangerous, and therefore perhaps they should be banned maybe a bit quicker than 2027, or the 2027 regulations should be redrawn to kind of completely eliminate them. We saw Raul Fernandez race without any wings, and a bit of a throwback to sort of 2018, 2017. So it's possible the bikes can ride without those wings. But yeah, I think that was the interesting part for me. It's the first time the stewards have acknowledged that, and I think it really backs up what a lot of people have been saying, us, the media, the riders, that aerodynamics have had a really massive negative impact on MotoGP, both to the race and to the overall safety. That we should definitely do a better job of getting rid of them in future. They're being tightened up in 2027, but not completely eliminated.
Yeah, they're still going to be there, and it's just
I like I say, if I was a manufacturer that wasn't Ducati and was a bit behind in my aero development, I would definitely try and see if we can't get the 27 regulations changed a little bit more to remove the aero completely.
Yeah, just going on to that point of Ralph Fernandez, I put a photo up on our Christ Instagram. Go look at it. It's comparison without and with the wings. My God, I seen it without the wings. I was like, oh, it's like a throwback. It was beautiful looking almost. And I was like, that's what MotoGP should look like. But yeah, we'll come on to that in another day about aero debates and whatever. And yeah, I think it was well, how can I say it? Aerodynamically for Jack Miller, Pete, he had a few rearrangements with his KTM on Saturday with the wildlife. I mean, first in, I think it was Q1, wasn't it, where he had the hair that hit the side of the KTM, and then in the sprint, we tossed out the photos, you can see it from the helicopter, you see the seagull hitting him at the very start, I mean, that left a massive size gap in that KTM, with some photos of not very nice to say for the Seagull. It didn't really end well for him, and it got wedged in between Miller's brake lever and stuff. It was all a bit chaotic for Miller, wasn't it, Pete?
It was, yeah. I mean, the local guy who perhaps, has it knows better than anybody how much wildlife there is in Australia, and he's kind of the victim of it. But yeah, scary stuff, really. I mean, they might look all sort of fluffy and feathery, but I hit a chicken once going very slowly on a motorbike, and I can tell you, it gave me a dead leg. So I can't imagine, to hit something, at those sort of speeds. I mean, they're pretty solid, aren't they? And scary stuff. I mean, you mentioned the grid, actually. I think a few riders mentioned the sprint grid, that there was this sort of almost a flock of birds
that's right.
that came
At
across,
turn one.
wasn't it? Yeah. People were talking, having to duck out the way and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's, the potential is there. We're talking about safety and things like that. I mean, there's been a lot of near misses, isn't there, over the years? The headbutting the Seagull and everything else, isn't there? I mean, what do you do though? What do you do? I mean, it's on, the area is obviously it's right out on the edge of the coast. It's not an urban setting by any means. It's full of wildlife. I mean, you could use some sort of bird scarers, maybe. I don't know, but it would be, then you'd have these sort of huge explosions going off all the time. So that wouldn't exactly be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you do about it? I don't know, but it's definitely something that you've got to be aware of. And I think one of the riders, maybe even Martin, was saying you've also got to be aware of it in terms of your tactics, because the race could be red flagged.
To position yourself, exactly. That's it.
So and I think that's also why he was pushing so hard, wasn't he, in the early stages, to make sure he was in the lead for as long as possible, in case some of the wildlife came out. Now, I don't know what would happen if a team member happened to release a rabbit when their rider was leading or something like that, but to cause a red flag. I mean, that would be the underhand tactic to use it in that respect. But we did see Sessions red flag, didn't we, over the weekend, because of, for very good reason. There were great big geese sort of slowly wandering across
just nonchalantly
the track.
walking across the track.
Exactly.
And it's like,
yes.
They don't fear anything, these animals. And a good point to mention the history of it, because we've seen it. I always think back, there was Jorge Lorenzo 2013 got one of them wedged into the side of the Yamaha, and the scenes of like the broadcast, I think you can still watch some video pass where the Yamaha mechanic just lifts it out, and it doesn't make for pleasant viewing, but it is very dangerous, isn't it? All the wildlife that's here.
Yeah, I mean, we like to kind of joke about it, the Iannone hitting the Seagull and things like that, but like those well-fed Seagull can weigh a couple of kilograms. You imagine being on the road and a 2-kilogram dumbbell hits you, square in the helmet. It's gonna hurt, and that's the thing. And with Miller, it's obviously caused quite a lot of monetary costs, damage to the bike. That fairing is probably not usable again, the one with the massive gaping hole in it. It was a dangerous thing for him as well when he hit the Seagull, because it blocked his brake lever. So, if he goes into turn one and he can't brake because of the bird there and wipes out 4 or 5 riders, causes all sorts of injuries, we don't want riders' championships being decided because a rabbit's run on track. We've seen plenty of, over the years, of animals causing quite serious accidents, and you think back to the TT, for example. You think of
getting hit in the head.
I remember being there a couple of years ago when Dean Harrison hit the bird, and it was all up in his leathers and stuff like that, which is, not to get all nanny state about it, it's a bit of a health hazard as well. Birds do carry, animals do carry diseases.
Yeah, and Paul Jordan as well. He had black eyes and stuff from getting.
And the one for me that comes to mind, obviously, on a much more serious note, is Nick Crow.
That's right.
Sideguard driver hit rabbit, and obviously lost several limbs because of that. These are serious problems, and Phillip Island's a fast track. We can't really be having things like that. What can they do? I don't know. I know, the farmers, for example, there's like a laser kind of system they use to scare away birds to stop them eating crops. That would be quite tricky to implement on a racetrack, because obviously you didn't have lasers sort of, get cross sections with circuits and stuff. But there are lots of different technologies that can be used to scare animals away. The organisers for the Australian Grand Prix at Phillip Island do need to do a better job of trying to contain like the non sort of flying kind of animals, the ones that can get on track. There must be better ways of doing that, whether it's a case of they do a bit of a roundup before, on the weeks up to the race, and try and kind of control where they can kind of wander about. But yeah, it does. I think it is a bit dismissed a bit too much. It's been, oh, it's funny, oh, Phillip Island, oh, birds, oh, haha, let's do joke helmets and stuff like that. We won't be saying that when there is a serious accident, and and for Miller, it really conditioned his weekend. The rabbit strike in qualifying left him with a damaged fairing, which cost him a lot of time. In the race, in the sprint race, he was losing 10 kilometers an hour on the straight line because of the hole in the fairing. It really, really caused a lot of problems for him. And Miller had a lot of speed this weekend.
He was pretty quick. Yeah.
Had he been able to get out of Q1, he might have had a much, much better weekend. So yeah, it has affected that. Had it have, and now imagine in the Grand Prix you got this great fight from Marc and Martin, and it's decided because one of them hits a seagull and the bike's broken. All of a sudden we're looking at it thinking, well, that's crap. We've just lost a really good race because of something that does need to be do about. Animals going to happen a lot, now and again, but we don't really see it many other racetracks. You get the odd hair might appear every now and again, but doesn't happen that often. So, yes, I know Phillip Island's a bit of a unique one, but I think there does need to be a better job done there to try and fix it, because it does seem like over the past few years it's kind of gotten a bit worse.
Yeah, it has, and superbikes have been affected by it as well and stuff. So time of year, obviously they do it in February, but there's still animals there. A really tricky one for the organisers and stuff, but thankfully had no injuries or anything. Only real injuries were to the animals themselves, which is it's unfortunate, so it is.
Yeah, and also just from an optics point of view, it's not really great when you have a world championship. We're trying to be in this, and not to get all kind of Greenpeace about it, but we are in kind of an age where MotoGP is moving towards sustainable fuels, is trying to improve the green image of the championship. It doesn't then look great when you're watching on television birds and rabbits and things like that getting absolutely annihilated. It doesn't look great for your green image. So
no, it doesn't. Yeah, we'll see what happens next year with that. But how do they fix it? That's not for me to. I'm not an expert in wildlife, falconry, and all that you can look at and try and just stop it. But yeah, we'll see how they can improve it. And just to touch on as well, we'll say, forgot to mention Michelin, great job, because we were coming into this weekend thinking maybe the surface might not be, it might cause too many problems for abrasiveness and the tires, but no issues whatsoever. I think it's testament to show the pace that Marquez and Martin were able to run as well. The tires looked like they could go for ages on that surface, which is a very good thing as well. And the strange thing, notice it in Moto 2 and Moto 3 briefly, the wetter the track was, the faster they were on the Pirellis, but when it dried out, with the wets, they were 3 seconds slower. So that was quite interesting at times during practice when I'd watched it back. Interesting to see how they worked with that. But like I said, we got dry races for all 3 classes, and that was a good thing. Just to touch on Pedro Acosta, Pete, a real tough weekend for him. Crashes, a real nasty eyesight. It was he didn't deserve that after his great helmet that he had put out, that Australian sort of tribute, which I thought was brilliant with the mullet and everything. But it was a real a real bad one for him. He just was playing catch up the whole weekend, really, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, the accident itself was sort of overlooked because of the whole Bezzecchi and Vinales thing, wasn't it? That happened at around the same time, so that took all the attention. But yeah, when you saw the replays, I think it was Siberia, wasn't it? Turn 6, the corner that he sort of got launched at, and really, really heavy one. And unfortunately, it sounds like ligaments, doesn't it? Which is the dreaded thing that we hear.
That is bad, yeah.
It's not an easy one to fix. No broken bones apparently, but yeah, the ligaments obviously. Digia, who will come on to I think shortly, he's obviously stepping down, isn't he? Because to fix the ligament damage that he's got in his shoulder from Austria, where he dislocated it. Now, it's not quite clear if Acosta actually dislocated his shoulder. I mean, momentarily or something, but it seems to have stretched the ligament. So that's sort of the implication, is that something maybe went out and then went back in very quickly. But yeah, ligaments are a tricky one, and the worst time, isn't it? The first race of a triple header to get injured, and so it's now very much a race against time to see if he'll be fit for Bourbon this weekend.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted on that. Check our socials, check of course Crash.net for any updates on Acosta. But as Pete mentioned, Fabio Giannantonio is stepping down after this weekend to go get surgery on his shoulder, and that leaves us now to talk about who's going to replace him, Lewis, because there's been a few over the weekend really interesting developments. It seems that it's going to be someone From the World Superbike paddock, we've got a few names. I'll mention them now. Andrea Iannone, Nicolo Bulega, Danilo Petrucci, of course, Michele Pirro as well can be mentioned in there. A real opportunity for any of those riders, especially the Superbike boys, to come into MotoGP again.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but it almost highlights the kind of a need for manufacturers and teams to be able to have a bit more testing and have a bit more of a structured junior program, because this is the perfect opportunity to give, you know, a young rider from Moto 2 an opportunity, or for you know, Super Sport or something like that, an opportunity. Like we see in Formula 1, look at AlphaTauri, RB is called.
Racing Bulls, aren't they? Yeah, that's
Toro Rosso, right? That's what it is.
Toro Rosso. Minardi.
You know, obviously Minardi, yeah. You know, Ricardo's been dropped and replaced him with Liam Lawson, and it was the same last year. You know, Lawson kind of coming in as just, you know, you've got that junior structure there, but you can also give these drivers time to test the old cars and things like that. It'd be good to see something like that in MotoGP, because, you know, well, yes, someone like Ayagura is not going to step up. You know, if you're fighting for a championship, but, you know, someone, you know, say Aaron Canet was part of, you know, Aldegué, you know, Fermin Aldegué, this would be a perfect opportunity for Fermin Aldegué to be pushed up into to get a couple of races on his CV before he makes his full-time ride. But as it is, they're looking at the World Superbike paddock. It seems like it's Andrea Iannone, who, of course, you know, was just finished a 4-year doping ban, has been racing World Superbikes this year. Has been very quick in World Superbikes since he's returned. I don't know if that's the best option. It seems like there's this kind of real push to sort of really push the rehabilitation thing for Iannone. You know, he made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, when you look at how we kind of view doping cheats in other sports, you know, over the years, it's not really the same kind of approaches taken. If anything, it's a much more aggressive kind of attitude. And, you know, I know there's a lot of dispute about Iannone. Yeah, you know, it was contaminated meat, blah, blah, blah. I personally don't buy that. And obviously the World Anti-Doping Agency didn't buy that either. I'm not really sure about it. You know, he's been away from MotoGP bikes for so long. He really, if you were going to give someone who's not had a lot of experience on the bike, you'd give it to maybe Bulega, for example, who's done such a fantastic job. And obviously there's that VR46 connection, but it gives a young rider who was kind of steered away from MotoGP because his junior results weren't as good, an opportunity that he's earned brilliantly through World Supersport, through World Superbikes. You know, or if you want an experienced guy who can at least, you know, do some decent results, I'd give it to Petrucci. You know, he rode the GP23 last year. He's a really popular figure. You know, it'd be great for him to have a couple of races. You know, Valencia was where he kind of finished off his career. It'd be fantastic for him to get a really competitive final race under his belt. You know, I don't really like the Iannone thing, but if that's the way it's going to go, then I don't sign the papers, so that's the way it's going to go.
Pete, who would be your pick for Giannantonio's replacement? As I said, there's a few options there to go for, and they're all different sort of way. But who would you pick if you were at Ducati in VR46?
Yeah, as you guys have said, you can make the case for just about all of those people, can't you? One way or the other. I think, you know, Iannone is sort of the headline choice, isn't he? He'll grab the limelight a little bit because, for the reasons you've said, he's been out of MotoGP for so long, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm with Lewis in that I think it would be better for Bulega to get it personally. Just for a start, he's outperformed the others in Superbike this year, hasn't he? You know, just if you go off the results, he's second in the World Championship as a rookie as well. And then you bring in the other factors of having been that VR46 rider for many years and in the race team, and then the split with VR46. It would be a nice sort of coming back into the fold, you know, for 2 races. Of course, it'll be 2 rounds. Now I know that obviously the other side of it is that jumping in without a test, that's a big thing to do, you know, having never ridden a MotoGP bike. On the other hand, it is 2 rounds, so if you do get, and it is a bit of an if, because there is some talk that it might be one rider for Sepang, another rider for Valencia, for example. Pirro would be the obvious one for Valencia because of the post-race test. He could try a few things, couldn't he, for 25 and all that kind of thing. So, but if Bulega was able to get both rounds, you could almost say, look, use Sepang as the test, get up to speed, learn the bike, and have a chance. And I think, as Lewis said, he's the only one of this the group of riders, and they're all deserving in one way or another, but he's the only one that potentially has a future in MotoGP, you know, as a full-time rider. And we've seen that Ducati, they're losing 3 young riders, aren't they? next year, the end of this year. There is a bit of a void as far as the future. That okay, there's Digia, there's LDA coming in. We need to see what he does. But Bulega is turning out to be a bit of a star, isn't he? In Superbike,
Yeah.
what he's done, he could be an option for the future there as well. So getting him on the bike, it could be great for him. I think part of me also has a bit of sympathy for Pirro. He lost the wild cards this year, didn't he, with the concession rules? So he's been doing all these laps, pounding around Mugello, which is talking about high-speed circuits, a really fast track, taking all the risks, but with none of the glory whatsoever, just trying out parts. And, it'd be nice for him to get some sort of reward of a race. And he would obviously know the bike better than anybody. The other guys, as Lewis said, they have some recent experience. You could throw Bautista in for Sepang last year with a bit of recent experience.
Petrucci as well.
And Bulega that are sort of without the experience, aren't they? But I think all in all, I mean, if he wanted to do it, I think I'd go with Bulega, and for those reasons that really he's a young guy who does potentially have a MotoGP future.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think my choice would be Bulega. Personally, I think his season as a rookie has been fantastic. Going into that factory Ducati team at World Superbike and going up against the two-time reigning champion who's looking to make it 3 in a row. He beat him by 127 points this year. He out-qualified him in every single round as a rookie. He took the fight to Top Rack, and that's not easy. So it's not. Yes, of course, it was circumstantial that the title went to the final round because of Top Rack's injuries and stuff from that horrific crash in Magny-Cours. But Bulega, since that summer break especially, has gone to tracks that he doesn't really know, and he's been the best Ducati. And I think it'd be, like you say, a nice sort of story to go back into the MotoGP paddock, because he was seen as the next prodigy, really, from the VR46 Academy all those years ago. It never really worked out, and of course he went his own way and used Supersport to rebuild his career, and look what it's done for him. I think it would be a really good opportunity for him. Anything to add, Lewis?
Yeah, and I think as well it'll be good for Dorna overall, because I think we've seen examples this year of riders who have come through a slightly different route. Manu Gonzalez winning in Japan, obviously coming through that World Supersport 300 sort of thing. I think it's often kind of looked at as if you go the Superbike route, or if you're either forced there, or if you have to go there because you've not got enough money, you're kind of icing yourself out of getting into Grand Prix racing and getting up to MotoGP. And I think Bulega giving him that opportunity to just, as a reward for a fantastic rookie season, and potentially as a bit of a test for something, in a year or two down the line, would be great. Because if you're a young rider and you look at that and you go, okay, well, he did Grand Prix and went to Superbike paddock, and now there's a lifeline in MotoGP. I could do that. It'll help a lot of young riders who maybe don't have the budgets to go into into Moto3 or even into those sort of, junior GP championships, because it's expensive to go racing. Let's not forget, and it's only getting more expensive. So I think Bulega, there's a kind of there would be a real significance and importance to him getting that, because I think it would just be great for every other young rider out there looking to try and get their way through into their career up to MotoGP, if that's what they want, to show to them, look, if you go a different route and go really well on superbikes, for example, that's not your chance in MotoGP over. And I think for too long now we've sort of seen World Superbikes as kind of blocking as a block really for anyone going to MotoGP. The fact that Jonathan Rea never went over all these years, I think the fact that Top Rack isn't going over anytime soon, the MotoGP paddock looks at that and goes, well, clearly there's nobody else good enough. But that's not necessarily true. So yeah, I think what is the point in having all these, talent cups and junior structures and this thing and that thing if you're not then going to reward young riders regardless of what championship they come from? For example, if you had like a rider on a Ducati, a young rider on Ducati and British Superbikes, for example, that won every single race, would you look at that and go, well, he clearly doesn't deserve an opportunity elsewhere? You would, there needs to be more of an emphasis to give young riders opportunities. We see next year in the MotoGP grid, there's a couple of riders who haven't really been performing this year getting extended stays over rookies, over young riders. You need to forge the future, and you should do that with any opportunity possible. And this is another reason why I don't think Iannone should get it, because he's had his chance. We're not talking about a rider who went on a doping ban just a couple of years into his MotoGP career. He'd been there a while and had not really done a great job.
Yeah, it bounced around a few teams and stuff, and yeah, I think it'd be nice to see Bulega. Personally, I just think he's the one that deserves it, and to reward him. Yeah, he did say during the weekend at Jerez he would maybe like a test, but he kind of also said if an opportunity comes, he would love it. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on that across Christ.net when the replacement is announced, and yeah, let's see who it is for the next few rounds after this weekend. And also just to mention, we thought we weren't sure, but congratulations to Toprak, Razgatlioglu and BMW for making history. As Pete says, it kind of reminds him of the Rossi 2004 stuff. A magical year, and I know that, yeah, it means a lot to BMW to do that, especially when everyone kind of laughed at them for sending Toprak, and people said Toprak's career is maybe going to go down the drain when he made the move. But yeah, how 12 months can change everything. Just incredible. And on the other classes as well, just to round up, David Alonso, I mean, winning again. How dare he win again? It just makes it all boring in Moto3, but he's incredible. So he is 11 wins in a season. That is equal with Valentino Rossi's 1997 record from 125. And he attributed that by doing the same celebration with the sort of bandages around his head on the podium, which was quite ironic because we had Jorge Martinez Aspar beside him, which is the person who was beside Rossi racing against him on the podium, but he was there as team boss with Alonso. So yeah, a bit of a full circle moment there. And then in Moto2, Ayagura is so close now to wrapping up the world title. He needs a 5th place finish. Well, he just needs to finish inside the top 5 in Thailand to win the title. But that race between Aaron Canet and Fermin Aldeguer yesterday was, there was no love lost there between those two. I think they want to make each other cry more than anything on that final lap. And congratulations to Senna Aegis too for getting a podium as home Grand Prix with, of course, a Casey Stoner tribute helmet. That's the best way to do it as well. A lot went on over the weekend, gents. Don't really have that much time left to talk about Thailand in depth. Just kind of ask for a couple of words from both of you about who you think is going to be strongest. Pete, you'll obviously be there. Lewis, who do you think, well, we'll start with you first, Pete. Who do you think is going to be the main man this weekend going into Thailand?
I think, as we've said, going off last season, you say Martin would have the upper hand. But obviously the momentum that Marc is now building all the time, I think he's also been strong there. He's won a couple of times, hasn't he, in the past, I think, as well. He's done some great races there. So I think, I would put Martin as the guy to beat. Pecco was close by Sunday, I think, last year, from what I remember.
That's right, did a good race.
Bit of a difficult time in qualifying, didn't he? And a bit like we were speaking about Phillip Island, was on the back foot and sort of was behind and then got there at the end in the race, but it was too late to do anything about Martin. But a great race, very close at the end. Binder in the middle, I think, wasn't he, for KTM as well? So again, that just sort of underlines how much of a shame this is for Acosta to get this injury at this moment, because it's a track where the slow corners, the hard braking that we've seen the KTM go well, we've seen Acosta go well at, not as extreme as Motegi, but there are some hard braking zones there. So real pity, because I think it could be a good chance for KTM as well.
Lewis, what's your take on the weekend? Is it going to be more advantage to Martin considering last year, or can Bagnaia show that strength that we're looking for, that champion mentality to get back in the fight?
He's going to have to. As I say, he's as Pete says, Martin's kind of past form there from last year was strong, and yeah, Pecco 20 points. It's not a lot in MotoGP nowadays, but we're 3 rounds now, so any advantage is a big advantage if you're in the championship battle. So he's going to have to, and I think if he doesn't, if Martin, we do see another strong weekend from Martin, if it's a double win, if it whatever, the momentum is his, and I think going to Sepang, it's going to be an important weekend. I think it will be a really, really probably the most important weekend of the season so far.
Yeah, I think it'll be the tensest weekend, purely because I think, like you both mentioned, strengths for the others at maybe different tracks that we have left. This one could be the one where, say, Martin has the advantage, Bagnaia's going to need to do something. And who knows what the weather can do. And we've seen it in 22, where a massive downpour the whole weekend, and it really affected the title fight there. Fabio Quartararo got it wrong with the tyre pressures in the wet, and it completely ruined any chance that he really had of closing the gap to Bagnaia for that season. But yeah, interesting weekend ahead, and I hope we can get something similar like we got in Phillip Island. There was plenty of action there, and I hope it continues for the final few rounds. But if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to listen and subscribe wherever you are, Apple, Spotify, God knows where you listen to these days, anywhere, YouTube. Just make sure to subscribe to us and like the videos as well. Helps us massively on the algorithm, gets people to see it more. And if you want to leave a comment about what you thought of the performances from Marquez at the weekend, Martin Bagnaia, leave them below. We'll have a discussion. It's always nice to interact and get people's views on the weekend. But until then, we'll see you next time.